The man who truly cares about you is probably going to leave you feeling confused a lot. And yes, that sounds completely backwards. You've been told for years that if a man really likes you, everything should feel smooth, obvious, and easy, like you'll never have to question it. But that idea has been leading so many people in the wrong direction. Here's what often happens instead. When a man begins developing deep feelings, he doesn't always move closer. Sometimes he steps back. He becomes quieter. He starts acting differently. Suddenly, the person who was always there seems harder to read, and everything you've ever believed tells you that this means he's losing interest. But what if that's not what's really happening? What if his distance isn't the end of the story, but the beginning of something much deeper? Stay with me because this changes the way you see everything. You're probably thinking about someone right now. At first, everything felt natural. The conversations never stopped. The messages came all day long. His attention felt effortless. Then, almost overnight, something shifted. Now every reply takes forever. He seems distracted. It feels like he's living on another planet while you're left wondering what happened. Your mind races through every possible reason. Did you say something wrong? Did he meet someone else? Did you imagine the connection from the start? But here's the part almost nobody talks about. Maybe you didn't ruin anything. Maybe there isn't another person. Maybe the connection was completely real. Real enough that it shook him more than he expected. Real enough that he suddenly realized this wasn't casual anymore, and that realization brought emotions he wasn't prepared to face. The next part might surprise you because what looks like distance isn't always a lack of care. Sometimes it's someone trying to understand feelings that suddenly became much bigger than they planned for. When a man begins feeling something that truly matters, his first reaction isn't always to move closer. Sometimes his mind goes into overdrive, not because he doesn't want you, but because he does, and that can feel overwhelming. Many people handle emotions in completely different ways. Some feel better by talking things through, getting reassurance, and creating more closeness. Others deal with emotions by slowing down, thinking quietly, and trying to understand everything before saying a word. The stronger the emotions become, the more personal space they may need while sorting them out. So when he disappears for a few days, takes longer to answer, or isn't available as often, you may believe he's losing interest, when in reality he could be trying to understand why you've become so important to him. He's trying to process why you're constantly on his mind, why your opinion suddenly matters, why the future doesn't feel as simple as it did before. This is where many relationships begin to struggle. The moment he pulls back, fear takes over. More texts get sent, more questions appear. You ask what's wrong, what changed, whether everything is okay. You want answers immediately because uncertainty feels unbearable. But every attempt to force clarity can create even more pressure, not because he doesn't care, but because he now feels expected to process emotions in a way that doesn't come naturally to him. Don't miss what comes next because this small difference changes everything. A man who is developing real feelings doesn't always need someone chasing after him when he becomes quiet. Often he needs room to breathe. He notices whether you remain calm when he needs a little silence. He notices if your happiness depends entirely on his attention, or if you still have your own peace, your own confidence, and your own life while he works through what's happening inside his mind. Think about your own life for a moment. When you're overwhelmed, you may want to call a friend, talk through every emotion, and feel understood. That's how many people naturally reduce stress. But someone else may deal with the exact same pressure by becoming quiet, spending time alone, and organizing every thought before speaking. When someone is falling deeply for another person, those emotions can feel confusing, exciting, and even intimidating at the same time. That's why silence doesn't always mean rejection. Sometimes it simply means they're trying to understand emotions they haven't experienced in a long time. Unfortunately, many people never give that process a chance. They assume the worst, increase the pressure, demand immediate explanations, and unintentionally create even more distance. Eventually, the other person really does pull away, not necessarily because the feelings disappeared, but because the relationship began to feel like constant pressure instead of a safe place. So ask yourself honestly, when someone becomes quiet, what's your first reaction? Do you panic and chase answers, or do you stay grounded and allow time to reveal what's really happening? Let me know in the comments because I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if this message is making you see things differently, make sure you like this video, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Here's what so many people miss. Human emotions aren't as mysterious as they seem. People simply process them differently. Trying to make someone experience emotions exactly the way you do rarely works. It's like expecting someone to instantly speak a language they've never learned. The harder you push, the quieter they often become. When someone truly cares, they start thinking about the future, about responsibility, about whether they're ready, about whether they can become the partner you deserve. Most of those conversations happen silently inside their own mind, not out loud. They usually won't say, "I'm scared because these feelings are becoming real." Instead, they become thoughtful. They become quieter. They need time without pressure. And here's the surprising part. That quiet season may be when they're deciding whether this relationship has the strength to last. They're watching to see whether you can stay steady even when life isn't perfectly easy, because lasting relationships aren't built only during the happiest moments. They're also built during the confusing ones, when patience, trust, and understanding matter the most, when he needs time for himself, when he's working through personal challenges and can't give you all of his attention. He needs to know you're emotionally strong enough to handle that without falling apart. This is where many people unknowingly struggle. They see distance and immediately assume rejection. They send more messages. They ask what changed. They try to pull everything back to the way it was before. But every time that happens, it can send a different message than they intended. It can make it seem like they need non-stop reassurance, constant attention, and endless proof that everything is okay. Over time, that can become overwhelming because no one wants to feel responsible for another person's emotional balance every single day. Stay with me because this is where everything starts to make sense. The people who understand this don't react with panic when someone becomes quiet. They stay focused on their own life. They spend time with friends. They enjoy their hobbies. They continue growing, learning, laughing, and building a life that doesn't stop just because someone else became less available for a while. They aren't sitting by the phone waiting for every notification. They don't replay every conversation over and over in their mind. They simply keep moving forward. And something interesting happens. That confidence becomes noticeable. It shows that their happiness doesn't depend entirely on one person's attention. It shows emotional strength instead of emotional dependence. That quiet confidence often leaves a much deeper impression than endless chasing ever could. The next part might surprise you because this simple shift changes the entire dynamic. What truly captures someone's attention isn't desperation, it's confidence. People are naturally drawn to someone who has their own purpose, their own goals, and their own happiness. They admire someone who enjoys spending time together but doesn't lose themselves when they're apart. Constant pressure can feel heavy. It can feel like responsibility instead of connection. But someone who gives space without guilt, who remains secure even during uncertain moments, often becomes impossible to forget. Think about the stories you've watched over the years. The most memorable characters always have lives that don't revolve around one person. They're passionate, independent, focused. They're not sitting around waiting for every call or message. That's not only entertainment, it reflects something many people recognize in real life. When someone already gives away every ounce of attention without limits, there isn't much room left for curiosity. But when someone has their own world, their own dreams, and their own peace, they naturally become more interesting. So if someone becomes quieter for a while, don't immediately assume it's the end. It doesn't automatically mean the feelings disappeared. Sometimes it simply means they're trying to understand emotions that suddenly became much more serious than they expected. Don't miss what comes next, because this changes the way healthy relationships grow. The biggest mistake is making another person's emotional process entirely about yourself. Their silence isn't always a statement about your value. It isn't always about whether you're attractive enough, interesting enough, or worthy enough. Sometimes it's about their own fears, their own memories, and the emotional weight they carry from experiences long before they met you. Everyone carries emotional history. Everyone has been disappointed at some point. Everyone has experienced moments where they invested deeply and still ended up hurt. Because of that, when real feelings begin to grow again, many people naturally become more careful. They slow down, they think longer, they protect themselves while deciding whether it's safe to trust again. If they're judged for needing that time, their fears only become stronger. But if they're met with patience instead of pressure, something powerful often happens. They begin relaxing, they slowly open up again, they feel accepted rather than pushed. Now think honestly about your own experiences. Have you ever met someone who was available every minute of every day? Someone who constantly texted, constantly wanted attention, constantly made you the center of their universe? At first it may have felt flattering, but after a while it may also have felt overwhelming. That same pressure can exist in any relationship when one person depends completely on the other for emotional security. The connections people remember most usually contain space, curiosity, and a little uncertainty. Not because confusion is the goal, but because healthy attraction grows when two complete people choose each other instead of depending on each other. So if someone becomes quieter, don't rush to fix everything immediately. Stay grounded. Continue living your own life. Let them have the opportunity to miss you while you keep becoming the best version of yourself. If the connection is genuine, time often brings clarity that pressure never could. Lasting relationships aren't built by forcing certainty every single day. They're built through trust, patience, respect, and allowing both people to remain true to themselves. So let me ask you something. The last time someone pulled away for a while, what did you do? Did you immediately chase answers, or did you stay calm and continue living your own life? Let me know in the comments. If this gave you a completely different perspective, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear this today. Think about what happened after that. If you chased him, did it actually bring him closer, or did it create even more distance? Be completely honest with yourself. I'd really like to hear your answer, so leave it in the comments. And if this perspective is helping you see things differently, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and send it to someone who needs this today. Here's something many people never think about. When someone pulls back, they aren't always sorting out their feelings about the relationship alone. They're often questioning themselves too. They're asking if they're truly ready, if they can handle the responsibility, if they can become the kind of partner they want to be. Many people place enormous pressure on themselves before making a serious commitment. They worry about whether they'll be enough, whether they can meet expectations, whether they'll repeat mistakes from the past. Those questions can make anyone slow down for a while. Now imagine that during this process, they're also feeling pressure from constant messages, repeated questions, and the expectation to explain emotions they haven't even figured out themselves. Instead of feeling understood, they may begin feeling like they're already disappointing someone before the relationship has even had a chance to grow. Stay with me, because this changes everything. When you remain calm instead of reacting with fear, you quietly communicate something powerful. You show that perfection isn't required. You show that someone is allowed to have uncertain moments without immediately being judged. That kind of emotional safety often creates far more closeness than endless reassurance ever could. Now try looking at the situation from the other side. Imagine you finally meet someone you genuinely care about after being hurt in the past. Naturally, you become careful. You don't want to repeat old mistakes. You take your time because this relationship actually matters. Then, before you've sorted through your own emotions, the other person begins questioning everything. They constantly ask where things are going. They need reassurance every day. They expect immediate certainty while you're still trying to understand your own feelings. How would that affect you? Would it help you move closer, or would it make you want more room to think? That's why pressure, even when it comes from good intentions, doesn't always produce the result people hope for. Wanting clarity is understandable. Wanting security is completely natural. But lasting relationships rarely grow because one person demanded certainty before the other was emotionally ready to give it. They grow because both people are allowed to move forward, honestly and naturally. Don't miss what comes next, because this is where many people unknowingly sabotage healthy connections. You cannot control another person's emotional timeline. You can't rush important decisions. You can't force someone to become certain before they're ready. The only thing you truly control is yourself, your confidence, your peace, your ability to continue enjoying your own life while allowing another person the space to figure out theirs. That kind of quiet confidence creates trust, not because you're pretending not to care, but because your happiness isn't completely dependent on someone else's actions. Here's the challenge that changes everything. When someone becomes quieter for a while, you need to have a life that's already full, without depending on them to fill every empty space. You can't simply pretend to be busy. You need real friendships, meaningful goals, hobbies you enjoy, dreams you're building, and a future that excites you whether anyone else is standing beside you or not. This is where many people accidentally lose themselves. They meet someone they really like, and little by little that person becomes the center of everything. They cancel plans, stop investing in their friendships, rearrange their schedule, and slowly build their entire world around one relationship that hasn't even fully developed yet. Then, if the other person becomes distant, their entire emotional world suddenly feels empty. That's when overthinking begins. Every message gets analyzed. Every silence feels personal. Every delay becomes proof that something is wrong. But people who protect their own identity experience those moments very differently. They still have friends to laugh with. They still have goals to chase. They still wake up excited about their own future. That energy naturally creates confidence, and confidence is incredibly attractive because it comes from genuine fulfillment rather than emotional dependence. So let me ask you something. Outside of this relationship, what are you building right now? What excites you? What makes you feel alive? What goals are you working toward? If answering those questions feels difficult without mentioning another person, maybe that's where your attention belongs first, because lasting happiness can't depend entirely on someone else's attention. When you create a life that already feels meaningful, you stop chasing. You stop measuring your value by every message or every quiet moment. You become calmer, stronger, and more secure. And interestingly, that's often when healthy relationships have the best chance to grow. While someone is taking time to think about their future, their goals, and whether they're truly ready for commitment, remember this: their personal reflection isn't automatically a measure of your worth. If the connection is genuine, clarity comes from patience, not pressure. So tell me in the comments, what part of your own life are you investing in right now that has nothing to do with anyone else? And if this message gave you a new perspective, like the video, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. The real question isn't always whether someone has feelings for you. Sometimes the question they're trying to answer is whether they're truly ready to make room for another person in their life, whether they can become the partner they hope to be, and whether this is the right season for that kind of commitment. Those are deeply personal questions, and no one else can answer them for them. You can't convince someone they're ready. You can't reason them into certainty. You can't speed up a decision that requires time and honest reflection. That part belongs to them alone. And the harder someone feels pushed, the more complicated those questions can become. Suddenly, they aren't only wondering about the relationship, They're also wondering whether they'll be accepted during moments when they don't have every answer. They begin asking themselves if they'll be allowed to grow naturally, or if they'll always be expected to have everything figured out immediately. Stay with me, because this changes the entire picture. The people who eventually build strong, lasting relationships usually have one thing in common. They don't spend every day trying to force clarity. They continue living meaningful lives. They stay focused on their own goals, friendships, and personal growth while allowing the relationship to develop naturally. They aren't pretending to be unavailable. They simply have a full life that continues moving forward, and that gives the other person room to realize they genuinely want to become part of it rather than feeling pressured into it. So when someone leaves you feeling uncertain, when you don't know exactly where you stand, you always have a choice. You can react with fear, chase immediate answers, and try to remove every uncertainty, or you can stay grounded, trust yourself, and keep building a life you're proud of regardless of what happens next. That second path isn't always easy, but it's the one that protects your peace. Now consider something that many people never think about. What if that period of uncertainty is actually preventing a much bigger disappointment later? What if someone taking time now is healthier than making promises too quickly, only to realize months later they weren't emotionally prepared? Careful decisions often create stronger foundations than rushed ones. Relationships built only on excitement can collapse just as quickly as they begin, but relationships that survive honest reflection often have a better chance of lasting because both people entered them with open eyes instead of temporary emotion. The next part might surprise you. Lasting love rarely appears overnight. It usually grows through patience, understanding, honest conversations, and two people slowly deciding that they truly want to build something together. That process isn't always exciting. Sometimes it's confusing. Sometimes it feels uncertain. But uncertainty alone doesn't automatically mean something is wrong. Sometimes it's simply part of making an important decision carefully rather than impulsively. Many people accidentally lose promising relationships because they believe every important answer must come immediately. They want certainty today. They want labels today. They want every question resolved before trust has had time to grow. But meaningful commitment is one of the biggest decisions people make, and thoughtful people often take that responsibility seriously. Think about any major decision you've ever made. Chances are you didn't make it in a single afternoon. You reflected, you considered different possibilities, you imagined what your future might look like. Relationships deserve that same level of care. So if someone is taking time to understand where they are emotionally, that doesn't automatically mean they don't care. It may simply mean they're trying to avoid making promises they aren't fully prepared to keep. And here's what often surprises people the most. The moment you stop trying to control every outcome, something inside you changes. You breathe easier. You stop measuring your worth by every message, every silence, or every delayed reply. You enjoy your own life again. That quiet confidence becomes noticeable because it comes from genuine security instead of fear. Understanding that people often process important emotions differently helps you stop taking every moment of uncertainty personally. Instead of assuming something is wrong with you, you recognize that everyone has their own pace when facing serious decisions. So let me leave you with one final question. The next time someone becomes quieter while sorting through their own thoughts, what will your response be? Will you let fear make every decision for you, or will you remain calm, protect your own peace, and allow time to reveal what words cannot? Let me know in the comments, and if this perspective helped you see relationships in a completely different way, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and share it with someone who could use this reminder today.